Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Parenting Through the Parsha with Rabbi Matt Shapiro.
Sometimes you'll hear people talk about how Judaism is caught, not taught. This idea that though you can be in classes, be engaged in more formal types of learning, that the way to really understand Judaism, immerse yourself in Judaism, take it in a way that it stays with you, is by being in cultural experiences, experiential moments, seeing people do it firsthand. And that's the way in which Judaism can maintain a presence in a sustained way in someone's life. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think the other side of that is true as well, that you can't just assume that because people are seeing something or hearing about something. We talk oftentimes in our department here about how it's not enough for people to just see it at shul, that the way that something will really stick is if people see Shabbat observance, holiday observance, ethics, morality, etc., is when their parents and their families model it for them and with them. And sometimes it's important to be really clear about what's happening and why it's happening, not just assuming that because someone sees something happening often enough that they'll get it, but being very clear about what a practice or a ritual is for, why it's being done, and how to do it so that it can be something that is clearly understood, whether that's talit or tefillin or keeping kosher or keeping Shabbat, whatever it might be. And it's true that that can be taught at a day school or a religious school or in a synagogue. And in thinking about the framework for this podcast, part of that also ultimately lies upon parents, that we have an obligation to educate ourselves so that we have a clear understanding of what our tradition teaches. And not just for ourselves, but so that our kids can get it too. Parshat Vaetchanan has a lot of greatest hits in it. We get the Shema, we get the Ten Commandments. There's some very well-known passages, the V'ahavta, many recognizable elements over the course of these chapters than you would get in a quote-unquote standard weekly Parsha. But I noticed something interesting is an ongoing theme over the course of the Parsha, which is that over and over and over again, there are verses that talk about how important it is for the Israelites to make these laws, these rituals, these practices known to their children and to their children's children, making sure that people know that this isn't just something for them, but that this is so they are passing it along to the next generation and even into the generation after that as well. And one of those sections is actually the part leading right into the Shema in chapter 6, verse 2. It says, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere and follow these laws. And then shortly afterwards, it goes into the Shema, which is interesting in terms of thinking about how that relational connection within the family is maybe even a prerequisite, or at least a companion to really listening and hearing what's being taught. It's not just for one group of people, it's for the whole set of generations that it's being shared with. Just the other day, I read this really interesting essay by Estelle Frankel, who's a therapist and also a teacher of Jewish mysticism, and she was writing about generally what narrative is and how narrative functions. And first she quotes a great Hasidic master, Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, who wrote that the human soul contains within it the entire Torah, only it is inaccessible, and the written Torah is its interpretation. And Frankel goes on to explicate that, saying this radical teaching suggests that our lives are the true site of divine revelation, while the Torah is simply a tool for understanding our own infinite depths. So to explicate her explication, the concept here is that we each have within us, and over the course of our lives, something holy something godly that is being revealed through our lives. And when it's refracted through the Torah, that helps us to understand what's happening within us and through our lives. And the example for me that's present in that, that's anchoring this whole framework that I'm offering, is that, as I've mentioned over the past couple of weeks, we are rapidly approaching our oldest's bar mitzvah, T-minus 15 days. And that is very much present in my mind. He recently, quote unquote, officially became a Jewish adult as he turned 13 on the Jewish calendar. And he's been taking the mitzvah of putting on tefillin very, very seriously. And part of that is because of how supportive and consistent Sarah has been, frankly, in her encouragement of him to do that every day. Part of that is because of where he's at and what he's thinking about. And it's not something that would just be happening. That's not something that would just be caught. That's only something that happens because of how specifically and mindfully it's being shared. And so when I read these verses that are being stressed over and over again in the Parsha about making these known to your children and making sure that our generations after us revere and follow our mitzvot and our tradition, I'm seeing that happen right in front of me. I really feel like I'm living part of this Parsha, that there's a revelation happening through these experiences of what it is to bring our tradition more fully into the world. And I'm seeing that in turn within the more formal part of our tradition that's being read this week. Religious connection doesn't just happen. Spiritual connection doesn't just happen. We have to bring that mindfulness and attention for how we craft these moments and share this knowledge, how we think about it for ourselves and how we think about it for our kids and our community. And the moments that I've had with Jonah over the past few days, where we each have our tefillin wrapped and we're saying the V'ahavta together, and there's the line in the V'ahavta, which again is in the Parsha this week, where it says, V'shinamtam levanecha v'dibarta bam, that you should teach them to your descendants and speak about them, and to have that mirrored so clearly back to me through my experience. That's exactly what Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin is talking about. That's what our tradition is reflecting back to me. And not only for him, but also for me. That's a deeply powerful and holy experience, something for which I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.